Strange tales, yet mirrors of human life. Hey everyone! Welcome to Encountering Chinese, Strange Tales from Zhai. Today, I'm going to bring you a story called Zhong Qingyu. Zhong Qingyu was a renowned scholar from Liaodong, known for his exceptional talent. One year, he traveled to Jinan to take the provincial examination. While there, he heard about a Taoist priest residing in the vassal prince's residence, said to be skilled in predicting people's fortunes. Intrigued, Zhong Qingyu sought an opportunity to meet him. After completing 2 rounds of exams, Zhong Qingyu found himself with some free time and decided to take a leisurely stroll to Baoda Spring. By chance, the very Taoist priest he wished to see was also there. The priest appeared to be in his 60s, with a long beard reaching his chest and hair streaked with white, exuding the aura of an immortal. A large crowd surrounded him, eager to hear his predictions, forming a dense wall of people. Though the priest did not refuse their questions, he mostly responded in vague and cryptic terms. Zhong Qingyu stood on the outskirts of the crowd, yet before he could even speak, the Taoist priest suddenly fixed his gaze upon him, his eyes shining with joy. Pushing through the throng, he strode up to Zhong Qingyu, grasped his hand, and exclaimed with admiration, "Your character is truly commendable." Without hesitation, he led Zhong Qingyu up to a nearby pavilion, where they sat alone for a private conversation. With a smile, the priest asked, "Are you here to inquire about your fortune?" Zhong Qingyu nodded, "Indeed." The priest pondered for a moment before speaking slowly. "Your fate does not hold much good fortune, but you are destined to pass this provincial examination. However, upon your return home, I fear you may never see your mother again." Hearing this, Zhong Qingyu felt as though his heart had been pierced. He was known for his deep filial piety, and this revelation struck him like a bolt of lightning. Tears welled up in his eyes as he choked out, "If what you say is true, then I will forego the exam and return home immediately." The Taoist priest hurriedly interjected, "If you miss this examination, you may never have another chance to achieve scholarly success." But Zhong Qingyu remained resolute. "If my mother's life is at its end, and I do not return to see her one last time, what meaning would rank and honor hold for me?" The priest sighed deeply and said, "In my past life, I shared a bond with you. Today, I must do all I can to help." With that, he took out a small pill from his robe and handed it to Zhong Qingyu. "Send this medicine home immediately. If your mother takes it, her life will be extended by 7 days. This way, you can complete your exam and still have time to see her once more." Zhong Qingyu accepted the pill with gratitude and bid the priest farewell. Yet, even as he left, his heart remained heavy. The thought gnawed at him, if he could reach home just 1 day sooner, he could spend an extra day fulfilling his duty as a son. Unable to shake this thought, he decided to act immediately. Gathering his servant, he hired a mule and set off that very night, racing homeward as fast as he could. Who could have expected that before the master and servant had even traveled a single mile, the donkey suddenly turned around and bolted in the opposite direction? Seeing this, Zhong Qingyu quickly jumped off, trying to seize the reins and stop it by force. But the donkey was completely out of control, kicking and bucking wildly to break free. Zhong Qingyu was at a loss, drenched in sweat from the effort. His servant, seeing the situation, advised. "Master, why don't you stay and finish your exam first? I can go ahead and deliver the medicine. I'm sure the old madam wouldn't want you to abandon the exam either." But Zhong Qingyu refused to listen. He immediately hired another donkey, only to find that this new donkey was just as stubborn as the first, refusing to take even a single step forward. By now, the sky was growing dark. His servant pleaded once more. "Tomorrow is your final exam. Does one day really make such a difference? Please, let me take the medicine back first. Any more delay, and it may be too late." Left with no other choice, Zhong Qingyu reluctantly agreed. The next day, Zhong Qingyu hurriedly completed his final exam. He didn't even have time to take a sip of water before setting off for home. Upon arriving, he learned that his mother had been bedridden the day before. However, after taking the medicine brought by the servant, her condition had improved significantly. Rushing to her bedside, Zhong Qingyu was overcome with sorrow and wept uncontrollably. His mother shook her head gently and consoled him in a soft voice. "Don't cry, child. Just now, I had a dream that I was in the underworld and met the king of hell. He was kind and told me. I just reviewed your life and found that you have never done anything wicked. I also know that your son is a man of great filial piety. Heaven has taken pity on your deep mother-son bond and has decided to grant you 12 more years of life." Hearing this, Zhong Qingyu was overjoyed. Sure enough, within days, his mother made a full recovery, as if she had never been ill. Not long after, Zhong Qingyu received word that he had passed the examination. Overjoyed, he bid farewell to his mother and returned to Jinan. Once there, he carefully prepared a gift and entrusted it to a eunuch in the palace of the vassal prince, asking him to deliver it to the Taoist as a token of gratitude. When the Taoist received the news, he readily agreed to meet Zhong Qingyu. As soon as Zhong Qingyu saw him, he immediately knelt down and bowed deeply, his heart overflowing with gratitude. The Taoist smiled and said, "Now that you have passed the examination, and your mother has gained more years of life, it is all thanks to your noble character. I am merely a humble Taoist who offered a small effort. There is no need for such grand gestures of thanks." Zhong Qingyu was astonished. He had not mentioned his mother's recovery, yet the Taoist already knew. Convinced now that the man was no ordinary mortal, he bowed once again, earnestly pleading for insight into his future fate. The Taoist let out a sigh and slowly said, "Your future is not destined for great wealth or high rank, but a long and healthy life is a blessing in itself. In your past life, you and I were monks cultivating together. One day, you threw stones to chase away a vicious dog, but by accident, you killed an innocent frog. That very frog has now reincarnated as a donkey. According to your fate, you were meant to die young, but your filial devotion has moved the heavens. A divine spirit has been sent to protect you, so I believe you will now live a long and healthy life. However, your wife was unfaithful in her past life. Because of that, she is destined to become a widow at a young age. Now that your virtuous deeds have extended your life, her fortune is no longer sufficient to be your wife. I foresee that she will pass away within a year." Hearing this, Zhong Qingyu felt sorrowful for a long time. Taking a deep breath, he asked again, "Then who will be my future wife?" The Taoist replied, "She is in Zhongzhou and is 14 years old this year." As they parted ways, the Taoist gave one last piece of advice. If you ever find yourself in great danger, flee toward the southeast. A year later, Zhong Qingyu's wife indeed fell ill and passed away. At that time, his uncle was serving as a county magistrate in Jiangxi. To help him move past his grief, Zhong Qingyu's mother suggested that he go visit his uncle. As he passed through Zhongzhou, he remembered the Taoist's words and decided to slow his pace. While traveling through a village, he saw a crowd gathered by the river, watching a theatrical performance. Men and women stood closely together, enjoying the show. Just as he was about to tighten his reins and avoid the crowd, a male donkey suddenly broke free from its tether and began chasing after him. The mule Zhong Qingyu was riding reared up and kicked at the donkey. Startled, Zhong Qingyu turned back and whipped the donkey's ear. The frightened animal bolted forward in a frenzy. At that very moment, a young noble child, around 6 or 7 years old, was sitting on the riverbank in his nanny's arms, playing. The panicked donkey charged ahead, and before the guards and servants could react, the child was knocked into the river. Cries of alarm filled the air as people rushed to grab Zhong Qingyu. He had no choice but to whip his mule and flee for his life. Then, he suddenly recalled the Taoist's warning. Without hesitation, he turned and rode at full speed toward the southeast. After traveling more than 20 miles, he arrived at a small mountain village, where he saw an elderly man standing at his doorstep. Zhong Qingyu dismounted and respectfully greeted him. The old man welcomed him inside and introduced himself as Fang. After settling in, the old man asked where Zhong Qingyu had come from. Zhong Qingyu knelt before him and recounted everything in detail. The old man reassured him, saying, "Don't worry. Stay here for now. I have a way to make your pursuers leave." That night, Zhong Qingyu finally learned that the child who had fallen into the river by mistake was none other than the heir of the vassal prince's household. When the old man heard this, his face turned pale with shock. In a hushed voice, he muttered, "If this were any other family, I might be able to find a way to help. But now that the child belongs to the royal household, I'm afraid there's nothing I can do." Zhong Qingyu pleaded desperately, unwilling to give up. The old man thought for a moment before finally saying, "There's no solution for now. Stay here for the night, and we'll think of something in the morning." Zhong Qingyu couldn't sleep a wink. Anxiety gnawed at him through the night. The next morning, the old man went out to gather information. When he returned, his face was grim. "The authorities have already issued an order to track down the culprit. Anyone caught harboring you will be executed as well." At these words, a troubled look crossed the old man's face, and he silently retreated into his room. Zhong Qingyu was filled with both confusion and fear, his heart restless. Late that night, the old man suddenly entered Zhong Qingyu's room and sat down beside him. After a long pause, he asked, "How old is your wife?" Zhong Qingyu replied, "My wife has already passed away." A flicker of understanding crossed the old man's face, and he suddenly smiled. "If that's the case, I might have a way to save you." Zhong Qingyu was puzzled. "What do you mean?" The old man explained. My brother-in-law is a devoted Buddhist. Years ago, he became a monk at a temple in the southern mountains and has long since distanced himself from worldly affairs. My sister passed away many years ago, and they left behind a daughter, whom I've been raising. She's a bright and capable girl. If you're willing, I can arrange for you to marry her. Zhong Qingyu's heart leaped with joy. This aligned perfectly with the Taoist's prophecy, and at the same time, he saw an opportunity to become family with the old man, which might grant him more protection. However, he hesitated and said, It would be an honor to receive your approval, but I worry that taking me in, a man accused of a crime, might bring disaster upon your family. The old man shook his head. This is all to save you. My brother-in-law possesses extraordinary abilities, though he hasn't interfered in worldly matters for many years. If you marry my niece, she may be able to convince him to help you escape your predicament. With his assistance, there's nothing that can't be done. Zhong Qingyu was overjoyed upon hearing this and immediately agreed to become the old man's son-in-law. The bride had just turned 16. Her beauty was unparalleled, rare to find in this world. After the wedding, Zhong Qingyu couldn't help but let out a deep sigh as he gazed at her, his expression filled with complex emotions. His wife smiled and teased, I know I'm not a great beauty, but do you really find me so unbearable so soon? Realizing his rudeness, Zhong Qingyu quickly apologized. My lady, you are as beautiful as a celestial maiden. Marrying you is a blessing I must have earned over 3 lifetimes. It's just that when I thought about my dire situation, I feared I wouldn't be able to spend my life with you, and that pained me. He then told her everything, every detail of his predicament. Hearing this, his wife furrowed her brows in displeasure. My uncle has gone too far. He harbored a fugitive, committing a grave crime, and now he's dragging me into this mess instead of finding a solution himself. Zhong Qingyu immediately knelt before her and pleaded. You mustn't blame him. I was the one who begged him relentlessly. He is kind-hearted but powerless to help. He knew your father possesses the ability to bring the dead back to life and believed that only he could save me. I may not be the best husband, but my family background is respectable. If you help me survive this calamity, I will devote myself to you wholeheartedly and never let you suffer even the slightest grievance. His wife let out a sigh. Now that we are married, I cannot simply abandon you. But ever since my father renounced the secular world, he has severed all ties with his children. Still, we have no other choice but to seek his help. I fear, though, that we will face many difficulties and humiliations when we meet him. That night, neither of them slept. His wife spent the night sewing 4 thick knee pads, stuffing them into their pant legs. At dawn, the couple hired a sedan chair and set off for the southern mountains. After traveling over 10 miles of winding, treacherous mountain paths, the porters finally refused to go any further, saying the road was too difficult. The couple had no choice but to continue on foot. The mountain path was steep and rough, and Zhong Qingyu held his wife's arm tightly, supporting her as they climbed. They stumbled along for what felt like an eternity until they finally saw the gates of a monastery. Exhausted, they sat down to rest. By then, his wife was drenched in sweat, her delicate makeup completely washed away. Seeing her in such a state, Qingyu felt a deep ache in his heart. I can't believe you have to endure all this suffering because of me. His wife sighed. Compared to what's ahead, this hardly counts as suffering. After regaining some strength, they helped each other up and walked into the monastery. Upon entering the main hall, they respectfully bowed before the Buddha statue before discreetly making their way toward the meditation chamber. Inside, an elderly monk sat cross-legged in deep contemplation, his eyes half closed. Beside him stood a young attendant, silently holding a whisk. The meditation hall was spotlessly clean, and before the monk's meditation cushion lay a spread of small stones, densely arranged like a field of stars. The wife dared not choose another spot and knelt directly on the stones. Qingyu followed, kneeling behind her. The old monk opened his eyes and took a look, then closed them again. The wife respectfully bowed and said, It has been a long time since I last visited you, father. Now that I am married, I have brought my husband to meet you. The old monk remained silent for a long while before finally opening his eyes and saying, You troublesome girl, always bringing trouble to others. With that, he closed his eyes again and said no more. Neither of them dared to rise and continued kneeling on the stones. Time passed, and exhaustion took over. The sharp stones dug deep into their flesh, scraping against their bones, sending waves of pain so intense they were nearly on the brink of fainting. After what felt like an eternity, the old monk finally spoke again. Did you bring the mule? He asked. No, the wife replied. Then go home, the old monk said. Make sure to bring your husband's mule next time. With that, the couple bowed and rose, staggering back home in utter exhaustion. Once home, they followed the old monk's instructions and brought the mule to the temple. Yet, they still did not understand the purpose behind it. With no other choice, they returned home and waited anxiously. A few days later, word spread, the criminal had been caught. He was bound and taken to the execution ground, where he was beheaded. Only then did the couple finally breathe a sigh of relief, realizing they had escaped certain doom. Not long after, the young attendant from the mountain temple arrived at their home, carrying a broken bamboo staff. He handed it to Qingyu and said, This is Mr. Bamboo, who died in your place. Before leaving, the attendant advised Qingyu to give the bamboo staff a proper burial, treating it with the same rights as a human, to free it from any lingering resentment. Qingyu examined the staff closely and saw traces of blood at the break. Following the attendant's words, the couple solemnly buried the bamboo staff with due respect. Once the burial was complete, they dared not linger any longer. That very night, they left Zhongzhou and made their way back to Liaoyang. Alright. That's all for today's strange tale, Qingyu. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe. Feel free to leave your comments and share with others. See you again in the next issue.